want to take a look at the key skills and terms related to samplers, related to patches, related to this audio recording and video production project. Starting first and foremost, we're talking about the mic input or the preamp, and that is really just the initial volume control that we have to apply to the signal. Of course, microphones send a very, very small electrical signal of the translated vibrations that they pick up down that microphone cable. Then we need to boost them with that microphone input. And on our mixing console in the studio, that is right at the top of each channel strip. We are also going to be looking for that signal to come in by looking down by the channel fader. We may also see some LEDs light up, and we'll be looking to give ourselves some headroom of about 10 decibels. So we want to shoot for about -10 dB. Well, we need to ask ourselves, does the microphone require phantom power? In our studio, the microphone does not require phantom power. However, the microphone is plugged into a device called a cloud lifter, and that cloud lifter does require phantom power. That acts as an additional microphone preamp, which boosts the signal about 25 decibels. We want to check the level. We want to get a good balanced level, especially if this is a musical performance that we're not going to be able to adjust the level on the fly. Let's take a look at sample rate and bit depth. Well, we always want to open our Logic preferences first, and we want to check to make sure we have the right audio interface selected. The options are going to be different from device to device. And we are going to want to make sure that we have the project settings set correctly so that we have the right sample rate. And of course, we've talked a little bit about sample rate. 44.1 kilohertz is 44,100 samples recorded per second, and that is each second of audio has 44,100 little snapshots of data associated with it. And that's why when we hear back recordings, they sound exactly like what we expect them to sound like, because they're that good. CD quality audio or professional quality audio sample rate settings are 44.1. When it comes to video production, it is 48 kilohertz or 48,000 samples per second. Some of these higher options here that are available on different devices are really for our purposes. I don't think they're going to be anything that we're going to be able to tell the difference between. But of course, on our mixing console and with the audio interfaces we have in the studio, we could go all the way up to 192 kilohertz. And again, I don't know why we would ever want to do that. We might want to record at 96 kilohertz. And again, I think for our purposes, we're not going to need to mess with that too much. As a general rule, 48 kilohertz is going to work well for our projects because most of our projects are audio video related. When it comes to audio recording settings, we do want to make sure that we have 24-bit recording enabled, and that is basically our highest bit depth. And a bit is the little piece of information that goes together to create a sample. Computers, you may have heard, record data in zeros and ones, and a bit represents one of those zeros or ones. And so 24-bit recording means that there's 24 bits of information associated with each sample. We obviously want the best quality we can get, and so we want to make sure that we enable that. And while we're here, we want to go ahead and choose WAVE because that is the standard format recognized by the Audio Engineering Society, etc., etc. Let us take a look at this idea of latency and how the latency relates to the I/O buffer size. Well, the I/O buffer represents the sort of stopping point between when the information comes down the microphone into the console, into the audio interface. It's going to sit in our computer's RAM, our random access memory, before it gets written to the hard drive. So just for a split second, the computer is going to collect 128 samples at this setting, and then it's going to write them to the hard drive. So it's going to collect 128 and then process it to the hard drive. And the I/O buffer size lets us make that number small as 32, or let's make that number large at 1024. And so with a small buffer size, what we're doing is we are reducing the latency, that is the delay of the sound from the moment that we sing or play into a microphone to where it goes all the way round trip through our interface back out to the headphones. Obviously, we want that buffer size to be small so that we don't hear a delay between our voice and what we hear back in our headphones. And so when we're recording sounds, we want to keep that I/O buffer size small. And you'll see here that we get a latency of 7.4 milliseconds. That's getting to be a little bit too much to maybe perform with. I've heard that 6 milliseconds is kind of the most you might want to try to sing against. You might not be able to hear yourself as a sort of delayed at 6 milliseconds. But anything beyond that, 11 milliseconds, 17 milliseconds, and on up to almost 50 milliseconds, you're going to start to hear this sort of phasing between what you hear in your headphones or what you hear live in the room versus what comes back into your headphones. So keep in mind, recording, you want the buffer size small. Mixing and using a lot of plugins and those kind of things, you can use a high buffer size. So mixing is a high buffer size, recording is small. Think though about what's happening with the computer processor. In the case of a 32 sample buffer size, the computer processor is having to work really hard. And if you have an older computer or a slower processor, you might struggle with that. When it comes to 1024 samples for the buffer size, in that case, the computer processor gets a little bit more time to do the job. And so that is something to think about in terms of the sample rate or the I/O buffer size in terms of samples. And now let's take a look at some of the things that we use when it comes to manipulating Logic. We want to pop open the Tools palette by typing the letter T. And when we hit the Tools palette, we see in front of us all the tools along with their associated shortcuts. So if I want to choose the Fade tool, I type T and then I type the letter A. If I want to choose the Text tool, I type T and then I type Shift T, which gives me the Text tool. And sometimes we'll use the Text tool to name a region something special. Okay, in that case I named all of them because I had it selected. Whoops. All right, so that's the Text tool. I don't use it all that much, but that gives you a sense of how it works. I also want to talk about Control Option to turn your mouse pointer into a zoom icon and then drawing a marquee box around it, which will let you zoom into a region. So this lets me zoom in really close. I can use T followed by I, which gives me the scissors tool, and I can slice into there and really trim this up nice and compact. And then I type T, A brings up the Fade tool, and I can basically just do what I just had. We bounced this region in class live, but there's also an idea you can do called bounce in place, and the shortcut for that is Control B. And if I bounce in place and click OK, what happens then is it saves that clip in a project folder. Let me show you how that looks. Before we take a look at where you can find those bounce files, I do want to point out that you should save your project as a folder in order to more easily find those files later. Once you do that, you can get into your project folder, and actually in this case you're going to go into the audio files and find the file that's been bounced in place labeled samples_BIP or whatever it is that you happen to name it. Let's add a software instrument track to this. I'm going to do it by right-clicking down here and choose New Software Instrument. I could also go Track, New Software Instrument Track. I could use that keyboard shortcut, but I don't tend to remember that keyboard shortcut. Now the next thing I want to do is something that I actually learned between now and then. I want to go Legacy, Logic. I want to go down here and choose Drums and Percussion, Ultrabeat Drum Kits, and then this is what I was looking for today, the Drag and Drop Samples Kit. I want to choose Drag and Drop Samples Kit. And then if I take a look at my input for the channel strip, that's where I can find the software instrument. So if by chance I have the wrong type of software instrument here, I can change and get the right type of software instrument. If I single click on that, I can open it, and if I happen to close it, obviously I can get that out. Because I've chosen the drag and drop samples drum kit, all of these are empty. If I wanted to, I could right click on it and initialize sample, and what that does is it clears it out. So this gives us a chance to take some of those samples that we've made and drop them into there. I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple of samples and drag them into there. There's one there. As I click the next blue row up, I can grab one here and drag and drop there. The next thing I'm going to do is get into this full view, and that's where I can start to create the pattern using this step sequencer. All right, let's see. I can hear that back by hitting the play button. And stop. Okay, it's very important to recognize that you can start and stop there. You can turn the sequencer on to always play when your Logic plays back by turning this power button on. The last thing that I want to show you is I'll show you a couple things. When I get this pattern the way I like it from here, I can drag and drop it from this button here into the arrange window there, and I might actually want to sort of zoom back out so I can see that. But now I've created that pattern, and as long as I make sure this is turned off, I can actually write another pattern over here by pulling this up from the pre-selected patterns area over here. One more thing to do that I kind of wanted to show you is that you can also, once you close that full view down, you can find the pitch shift, which I think is also very fun too. And you might find that some of those are fun to pitch shift up and down. In fact, you could duplicate them and pitch shift them as well. So this is just one way we can take samples and patches and put them together. If I really decide that I like an Ultrabeat sampler, I can go up here and I can save this patch that I've created by combining samples. I can put that into a patch of my own and save that to my computer. It looks like my computer doesn't want any part of that right now, but I could call that, the class sounds, that kind of thing. I'm not going to do that because obviously I didn't do a very good job with that one. That's a look at the key terms and skills. We'll talk to you soon.